The year is 1991 on a dark night on April 4th, when 20-year-old Angela Hammond stopped by a payphone along a silent street in Clinton, Missouri to make a call. She had just been to a night with family for a barbecue and was already feeling a bit tired, so she decided to leave a bit earlier. Angela, who was 4 months pregnant, stopped by a payphone along the way and rang up her fiancé, Rob Schaefer, to tell him she wasn't pushing through with their plans to meet up later that night. She preferred to go home and rest up before the next workday. While in the middle of their call, Angela's attention was caught by a lone pickup truck driving around the empty parking lot, which wasn't there a few moments before. She hadn't minded it at first, but when she noticed it circling the area and eventually slowing down to park a few feet from where she was, she immediately felt a cold chill run down her spine. She told her fiancé about it, and a concerned Rob instructed her to stay on the phone with him, describe what the driver looked like, and what he was currently doing. Suddenly, he heard Angela give a hair-raising scream, and just seconds after, her line went dead. That was the last thing Rob heard from his fiancé before bolting out the door to call for help. Angela's scream had pierced through the peace and quiet of rural Clinton that horrible night. But it would ring through Rob's ears for the rest of his life. The sleepy town would be shook to the core as a small-town girl of their own would go missing and would make headlines all over the country. From that point on, things would never be the same again. Angela Marie Hammond was born in Kansas City, Missouri, to parents Chris and Marcia on February 9, 1971. Soon after, she and her family decided to move a few miles south to the quaint city of Clinton, where Angela would spend most of her life. Clinton was a rural town with fewer than 9,000 people and the type of place where everyone knew each other and crime wasn't as likely compared to bigger cities. Angela, or Angie to everyone who knew her, was a friendly, outgoing, and popular girl admired by everyone from the town, especially her family and friends. She was close with her parents and a doting big sister to her sibling Lauren. She was also very loved at school, being remembered by her classmates and friends as smart, witty, and likable. Angie's best friend, Kyla Engman, also described her to be a fun and outgoing girl that radiated positive energy, and that there was never a dull moment whenever they hung out. In November of 1990, Angie, 19 at that time, would meet her boyfriend and future fiancé, 18-year-old Rob Schaefer, who was one of their school's star football players. Both were dubbed as the perfect couple, popular, smart, and friendly to all who would approach them. In January 1991, after just a few months of dating, the lovebirds found out that Angie was pregnant, and Rob, who was just as ecstatic, quickly proposed to her. An overjoyed Angie accepted, and they soon made plans to rent an apartment together and work hard for their future and their baby on the way. Angie attended Central Missouri State University for her studies during the day and worked as a bank clerk during the evenings, while Rob aspired to join the military that same year. As what we told earlier, in April 4th of 1991, Angela Hammond and Rob Schaefer were at a fun-filled barbecue dinner with Angie's family. Later, at around 10 p.m., when the night had settled down, the couple had left early, and Angie dropped Rob off at his house so he could babysit his brother for a few hours. They had promised to meet up again as soon as Rob's mom got back, so while waiting, she met up with her friend Kyla for a while to pass the time. But soon after hanging out, Angie gradually became tired from the night's events and wanted to just sleep at home. So she dropped Kyla off at hers and searched for a payphone. She didn't have a home phone, so she could call up Rob and tell him of the change in plans. This was around 11:15 p.m. Angie told Rob that she was contacting him from a nearby payphone at the intersection of Jefferson and 2nd Street that was about 7 blocks from his house. She told him she was retiring early that night and that they should just meet tomorrow instead. Rob agreed, and while the couple chatted randomly for a while, Angie had started to notice a pickup truck circling around the area. She didn't seem bothered by it at first until the truck had finally slowed down and parked right next to her car. Angie felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up when she saw the driver get out of his truck and immediately told Rob about this. Rob asked her to describe the driver, and she said that the driver was a dirty-looking man with a mustache and beard and was wearing overalls, a dark-colored baseball hat, and a pair of glasses. The truck he drove was a light green Ford pickup truck of an older model that had an image on the back of its window resembling a fish jumping out of water. Angie had also described the driver's peculiar actions. He stepped into the phone booth next to hers, appeared to use the phone for a while, got back in his truck, took out a flashlight and used it to rummage around the inside of his truck as if he was looking for something. Rob pointed out that the other phone must have been broken, so he told Angie to ask the driver if he wanted to use the phone that Angie was using. The bearded driver declined and said he was going to try the other one again in a minute. The couple felt all the more uneasy about this, so Rob had offered to come down to the booth. Angie had unfortunately declined and said that she was fine, so they resumed talking. This would be one of the most regrettable decisions that would haunt Rob for the rest of his days, because as soon as they picked up where they left off from their conversation, he heard his fiancée give a blood-curdling scream. Rob was frozen in shock, but he quickly recovered to shout frantically for Angie on the other side of the phone. Chillingly, he could hear the deep voice of a man say, "I didn't need to use the phone anyway." Then the line immediately went dead. Rob ran out to the garage and hurriedly drove to the location of the payphone described by Angie, which was thankfully just a few blocks from his house. While racing through the abandoned streets of Clinton at breakneck speed, desperate to reach his pregnant fiancée, Rob passed by a truck that fit the description Angie had given him earlier and heard someone scream, "Robbie! Robbie!" from the passenger seat. It was Angie. He hurriedly backed the car and barreled through the downtown business streets in hot pursuit of the pickup truck. Unknowingly, when Rob put the car in reverse and accelerated too rapidly, he had damaged the transmission. And just as the abductor's truck made a sharp right turn, to Rob's absolute horror, his car began to slow down and eventually stop, with smoke coming out of the hood. Rob felt hopeless and could do nothing but watch the truck drive away into the night. He tried to pursue the truck at a run, but he knew it was an impossible feat. Luckily, while trying to run around the town and look for help, he finally flagged down a car that drove him directly to the police station. The Clinton Police Department was greeted with a disheveled and panting young man, desperate to spring into action and save his fiancée. The police realized the urgency of an abduction and quickly took a flustered Rob's statement and got to work. Some of the officers did a quick check of the truck within the nearby premises, while others made a composite sketch of the truck driver as Rob relayed what Angie had described to him over the phone. Unfortunately, the eventual outcome of the sketch was not so helpful, as it had looked nothing like how he was described. The sketch portrayed a man with no glasses, no beard, and not even a mustache to go with it. It was just so poorly done and could have looked like anybody. Soon after, both the Hammond and Schaefer families raced towards the police station after being alerted to the night's terrifying events. In a later interview made by Angie's mother, Marcia, she said that when she had met up with Rob, he looked so downtrodden and that he blamed himself completely for what had happened. Marcia said that Rob had always promised to take care of her.
Rob blamed himself for it because he always told her he'd be there to take care of her. And he tried, he did everything that could be done. You know, nobody blames him, but I think he thinks that people blame him.
And that even years later, he still thinks that people thought he was the one to blame for all of it. In an interview from Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, Rob said that the beginning was the hardest because you knew you were close enough to get him, but you just didn't get the job done.
The beginning's the hardest because you know you were close enough to get him, but you just didn't get the job done. And you still wake up at night wondering where she's at, wondering what happened, wondering if anybody's still looking.
Angie's disappearance hit the town hard, as it was a small town community, so over 250 volunteers headed by family and friends, sprung into action and took part in the search and rescue operations. They had combed through almost the whole of rural Clinton and Henry County, including farms, forests, country roads, fields, and even the river areas to look for any signs of Angie or her abductor, or the infamous pickup truck. TV announcements were even broadcasted in hopes that anyone with any information would step forward. But after days of searching, nothing was found. So Clinton PD called for assistance from both the Missouri Rural Crime Scene Squad and were instantly given backup from 25 police officers from 15 neighboring counties. Not only this, but the Missouri Highway Patrol had also lent a helping hand by looking through their database of all registered vehicles. Detective Damon Parsons from Clinton PD and his team browsed through searches on registered vehicles along with the model and the year they were made and compiled them. But a list of over 1,600 vehicles turned up that had a possible match to the truck, making the feat like finding a needle in a haystack. The family had at some point got hopeless, seeing as no leads turned up, no sign of Angie or her abductor, or even his truck, and no witnesses had come forward as of yet. There was basically no moving forward at that time. With all the digging done in the first few days, police had nothing else to base their investigation on except Rob Schaefer's lone testimony. Not a single informant came forward with information about Angie's abduction, nor were there any witnesses to corroborate and back up Rob's story. This made the police shine the spotlight on Rob himself as the first suspect for the investigation. Could Rob possibly be the suspect they've all been waiting for? With no one to back up his story, and no way of knowing for sure if what he said really happened, since the call had been made by only him and Angie, Rob was a bit unlucky in this department. Rob was made to take a polygraph test, although this isn't really a reliable tool for interrogation, but since it was still in the 1990s, the police had used it. Fortunately, Rob was able to pass the polygraph test, and over the next few days, he also had a lot of people come to his defense, led by Angie's parents, Marcia and Chris Hammond. Both showed their support for Rob, saying that they never doubted, even for a minute, that he would do anything to hurt their daughter. The police had also done a quick check to confirm Rob's side of the story. His battered car was found where it said it was when he made the pursuit. Not only that, Angie's car was also found at the said payphone where the abduction happened, her purse and other belongings still inside. 2 witnesses had also stepped forward, finally, and claimed they had seen a green pickup truck that was circling the area near the payphones between 11:30 p.m. and 11:45 p.m. Within a week, an exhausted and burnt-out Rob was finally cleared of any suspicions. A few days after police heard rumors of a possible jealous ex-boyfriend motive in the form of Angie's ex, Bill Barker, some even went as far as citing the baby that Angie was pregnant with was probably Bill's and not Rob's, to which both men had instantly denied. After having a polygraph test of his own, Bill Barker, the second suspect, was cleared of any suspicions. The police were just shaking their heads at this. They had no idea how a crime in a small town like Clinton could have no leads, no current suspects, no glaring evidence, and just no answers to give to the community's burning questions. This led them to consider the possibility of Angie's abduction being connected to 2 other cases of unsolved abductions in areas near Clinton. These areas were Max Creek and Nevada, both of which were situated within a 100-mile radius from Clinton. The first case was in the neighboring town of Max Creek, Missouri, on a silent night in January 1991, where a woman named Trudy Darby was working alone at a convenience store. She noticed a suspicious-looking man standing outside the door that made glances at her every so often. Darby immediately called her son and told him about the odd man lurking outside. Her son raced to the store, but it was too late. When he arrived after just 10 minutes, his mother was gone and the store appeared to be robbed. 2 days later, Darby's body was found in a riverbank about 10 miles from the store, shot twice in the head. A month later, in February of 1991, Cheryl Kenny was also reported missing 70 miles from Max Creek in Nevada, Missouri, also abducted from a convenience store while working late at night. Kenny had apparently disappeared after closing up the store that night, and the next day, she was nowhere to be found, though her car that was parked in the store's parking lot was still there, being the only evidence to go on. And just less than a month later, Angela Hammond would be abducted. Although the police had brought up these different cases and have feared the worst in that a serial killer was possibly on the loose in Missouri, they would find that there was no clear-cut connection between them all, no solid evidence that would link the three. And even after all these years, rumors have just been the only thing keeping the case alive, as there have been talks of unconfirmed sightings of Angie in several states across the U.S., even as far as Canada. Nothing has been confirmed, of course, and year after year, the rumors just pile up. The family continues to call for the public to come forward with any information, with a reward to be given. The connection to the Trudy Darby case was also ruled out later, as it would be eventually found that it was half-brothers Jesse Rush and Marvin Chaney who murdered her. The brothers were convicted for the robbery, murder, and as found later on in the autopsy report, Darby's sexual assault. Both had also confessed to the crime through written letters they had sent to their attorney on the outside. Now, more than 30 years later, although the police continue to welcome any possible leads on Angie's case, they've already doubted any actual development, as it has already been decades since. So Angela Hammond's case continues to remain open, but for us true crime enthusiasts, a new spark of evidence, even years later, would always count and be most welcomed. And welcomed it indeed was, as an informant was said to have come forward to reveal shocking evidence dating all the way back to 1991, the year of the abduction. Just last April of 2021, on the anniversary of Angie's disappearance, Clinton PD, care of the unnamed informant, revealed an astonishing new theory being investigated, that Angela Hammond was probably a victim of an abduction due to mistaken identity. The informant stated that he was helping with the narcotics operations at that time, and had apparently received a cut-and-paste letter which read, "Hello, no, redacted. We know who you are, no, redacted. People like you deserve what you get. We know where your foxy daughter is at. She will see us soon. Tell, wife's name, she has our deepest sympathy in her further loss. Goodbye." This letter was even postmarked on the day of Angie's abduction, April 4th, 1991, and had matched the informant's court issue number along with his wife's first name. The informant also said that his family lived in Clinton at the time, and that he had a daughter who was also named Angela, and coincidentally looked very much like Angela Hammond. This other Angela, whose family was involved with the narcotics operation, and who possibly had a handful of enemies, was apparently the real target of the abductor that sought revenge on the family. The shocking development in the case actually became one of the more likely theories of Angie's disappearance, despite how old it was dated. The police had quickly done a background check on the family and the other Angela, and found that astonishingly, both girls had indeed looked very much alike, had very striking resemblances, and were in fact very close in location. This was definitely a long overdue breakthrough for the case, but undeniably the most plausible story. Even though it sounded like it came straight from a movie, it was still a huge possibility, albeit a depressing one, since it would have meant that Angie was a victim because of her being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The question begs to ask, though, why had this only come to light now, almost 3 decades later? We may never know. More questions and a gaping lack of answers still remain. Angie's family still await for the proper closure to their daughter's tragic story. They have at least continued to keep Angie's memory alive through the years, but at the same time have also moved forward and rebuilt their own lives. When another case of missing women happened in Missouri years after Angie's, Marcia Cook, Angie's mother who had gotten remarried, apparently befriended one of the missing girl's mother, Janice McCall, and soon became a support system for each other, having bonded over similar experiences. Both have even been interviewed by Oprah Winfrey herself. Sadly, she passed away in May of 2021 without ever knowing where her beloved daughter was, nor what happened to her all these years. And as for Rob, he eventually moved to a town nearby to escape the memories that had continued to haunt him, although has kept in touch with the Hammonds. He has worked in construction and after a time eventually made a family of his own. Pain, heartache, and what-ifs would always be there to haunt Rob Schaefer and the Hammonds, and yet they have always held out hopes for Angie's safe return. But despite all that has happened, they have instead chosen to keep Angie's memory alive, as well as honor and embrace the good moments they've had of her.